we can declare the agreement as void. What we mean by is void. A contract is void ab initio if it is based on some illegal or immoral grounds, or otherwise contrary to public policy. It means the contract does not exist at all. So it may also be void if it lacks one of the essential ingredients which I've mentioned already. When you take the case of Pierce versus Brooks, one could not recover a hire of a coach to a prostitute because of the illegal nature of the contract. So where the contract is illegal, immoral, against public policy, you know, public policy could be every child must have education, basic education, but if you make a contract to prohibit children to go to school, it is against public policy. Or you discriminate on the basis of sex, women, men, you discriminate, it is against public policy, then it will be declared void. Such a contract will be declared void. So void contracts are from the beginning, even if it's 10 years ago, before they discovered that there is fraud or illegality is detected. From that time up to the time it is discovered, the document or the transaction is void, is cancelled, is nullified. It cannot be accepted. Even if you had collected the money earlier, you can return the money because the contract does not hold. Then we talk about voidable contract. When we say a contract is voidable, the contract itself may not necessarily be illegal, but maybe one party has detected irregularity or some problem with the contract. So from the time he has discovered that, he will set it aside, and from that period going, then it cannot be applicable. So a contract that is voidable is one that is valid to start with, but which may be brought to an end or avoided at the option instance of one of the parties. If that party exercises this option, the contract will cease to be operative for that time. If it is voidable when, for example, if one of the parties has been induced by the other to enter into the contract, not free willingly, but induced by something and you realize it, then we can set aside the contract. So the court can set it aside, or may, at the option of the affected person, amend or change certain things and accept the document again or use it anytime. So we can take the case of Cobbs versus Overton, in which an infant agrees to enter into a partnership to be formed in the future, and he paid £100 in advance. He later changed his mind. It was held by the court that he could remove or he could recover the money since the contract was voidable at his option. This is an exception, but we have so many cases on this, and we can look at it. When we say unenforceable contract, then it means the contract is unenforceable if it is perfectly valid in all respects, except that it cannot be an action in court. And this will be the case if the party wishing to enforce it lacks particular type of evidence. For example, evidence in writing, maybe that type of contract is required to be sent in writing, which is necessary for enforcement of such a contract. However, the contract is still a valid one, so that if the other party performs it, you will be unable to recover whatever he may have given or paid in pursuance of a valid contract. And therefore, when we say the contract is unenforceable, it does not mean the contract is invalid or totally or is illegal, but because it did not follow a particular form required by a law, that contract cannot be enforced by the courts. So you must have to follow a form. If it is a house agreement rental, then there must be a form to follow. That is what is required under the other one. Now, the elements, if you take the elements one by one, for example, offer. I said offer is one of the elements of a valid contract. Offer is a proposal made by an offeror. The person making the offer is the offeror to an offeree, the person who is supposed to accept. And we have cases of defined offer and acceptance. For a proposal to be bound, the offer must be clear, unambiguous. The offer may be made to a specific particular person or group of persons or to the world at large. An offer is a statement or promise or undertaking which the person making it is prepared to enter into a legal relationship along the terms stated. An offer must be a complete proposal to another, leaving him or her to accept or reject. So statements which are not binding or not constituting an offer. So offer can be made to any person, individual, anywhere, anytime, but there are some statements which are not binding or does not constitute an offer to be accepted readily. Intention to make an offer or invitation to treat, this is one of the exceptions. Invitation. So there are some offer, you think it's an offer, yeah, it's an offer, but not ready to be accepted. Something else must be done before you can accept the offer. So exhibition or display of goods for sale. A popular English case, Fisher versus Bell, confirms this, that exhibition of goods in shops, they are not readily available offer for acceptance. They are only inviting you into the shop to make an offer. So when you enter a shop anywhere, before you enter the shop, you might have seen the display of the goods through the window, and you see price tag on it. The price tag is not the finality of the offer they are giving you. When you enter the shop, the price that you have seen is just inviting you into the room to make now your offer. So in this case, the shopkeeper or the salesperson is not the one making offer. He's only inviting you, the buyer, to make an offer. So when you put the goods on the table of the shop, you are now making an offer for the salesperson to accept. And by the principle, she can or he can accept your offer or reject it. So the salesperson can say, I am not going to sell the items to you. He has that right. Or, I'm sorry, you don't look nice, so I've decided not to sell the goods to you. The seller has that right, because the seller is the offeree. And you, the buyer, you are the offerer. You are making offer that you think you want to buy this. And then she will now give you the real price on the desk. The salesperson will give you now the price. It could be what you have seen, or it could be different. It should not necessarily be what you have seen before entering the room, but what the seller has given you in acceptance of your offer. He can change his mind. You see, if you make the seller the person giving the offer, if you are making the seller the person making the offer, then you are telling us that he cannot change his mind. So even if a minor is bringing the offer, that seller must accept it. Then he's disobeying a law, or he's violating a law which says you cannot sell certain items to children. But he's given that option to reject. So the seller has the option as the offeree to reject. If you are a mad person and you want to buy a drink, alcoholic drink from a shop, and because it's a mad person who is making the offer, the sales person who is the offeree can refuse, and you cannot take any action against the person, and you will not be violating any rule. But if you make it static, that he cannot change his mind, then you will be violating a criminal law, a law which prohibits that certain persons, you cannot sell certain goods to them, like alcohol to children and the rest. So that is why the law is made like that. The principle really is clear but difficult to understand, that the seller can refuse or change the price you have seen before entering the shop. So let me repeat that. The buyer is the offerer. The salesperson is the offeree. He is accepting your offer and may change the mind, accept or reject your offer. Very simple. So we have a lot of cases. An exception to the rule is the calorie I've mentioned, and carbolic smoke ball. An advertisement that an auction sale is to be held, if you see that. So advertisement in papers concerning prices of goods is another type of invitation to treat. And advertisements are to the public, to the whole public, not to a specific person. You don't know who is interested, it's to the whole world. So one person cannot sit in the house and assume that he has already accepted and must really collect the goods. The whole world may accept it. And therefore, it is not a ready offer for acceptance. Something must be done. You have to go, call, or an action must be made further. Then you make your offer. Even auction sales, for example, an auction sale, if a number of cars are advertised in the papers, it does not really mean once you are interested, you have made an acceptance. They are only inviting you to make a bid. So you are going to now make the bid for the price. And so when you get to the public place for the auctioneers to give out, if there's no restriction to the ceiling price, then if you are the highest bidder, then the hammer will go down, meaning that you are the one who is going to win that auction sale. So you are only invited to make a bid. You are invited by the advertisement to come and make a bid. So you are now making an offer to be accepted. So circulation of price lists or invitation to bid or submit a proposal. So it's not a ready offer for acceptance. So these are the few exceptions to offer. A few exceptions to offer. And there must be expression of good intentions, that is a statement to another signifying that the declarant is serious about the transaction, as in the case of Okai versus Okanse. There may be variations of terms of the offer or a counter offer. When a price and conditions of payment are given to one party by an offeror, then it's expected that you don't also make a new proposal or changing the price. If you do that, then you are also making a counter offer, an offer for the person making the proposal to accept. So we call it a counter offer. If the offeror disagrees with the terms you have changed, then you have forgone the first agreement. Then there can be new proposal. But you cannot go back to the first proposal you have made. So he is at liberty to sell the product to a third person because you have rejected the first offer, or you have altered the conditions. That's why we say even acceptance must be unconditional. You don't change anything in the proposal, then a contract is made. A contract could be terminated at any time, or offer for a contract may be terminated at any time or rejected. So before or withdrawal, before acceptance, that must be communicated to the other party for termination. There are many ways of termination of offer. Silence does not really mean you did not accept. There must be an action or communication about your interest or your rejection. Acceptance in the assent of all the terms of the offer. So you must accept all the terms of the offer, not partly. Then we can say contract will be made if you take some of the cases. Now acceptance must really be unqualified, and in all cases be unqualified, like acceptance of amount to reject the offer. Unqualified acceptance means acceptance must be precise, properly communicated back. No insertion of new terms, addition of subject to usual term of acceptance must be observed, so there must not be any other terms added to the acceptance. So if you accept, then it must be unqualified. Silence in contract does not always amount to acceptance. That is a rule you have to know. And where acceptance is given to an agent of the party. So an agent is acting on behalf of the principal. It is a complete, even if rely is not received by offeror, and must be considered as doing it on behalf of the principal. So a contract is rarely made once an offer has been accepted. The contract is formed and offer ceases to exist for any other person. So offer plus acceptance will give you a contract. Offer plus acceptance should give you a contract. An offer is effective only when statement is received by offeree, known to offeror. It must also be known back to the offerer. And it is complete. Acceptance is complete where it's given by the offeree, not necessarily when received by offeror. And the mode of communication of offer could be by telephone, post, email, and many methods. Today we have email is accepted, but not all instances. But we have the postal rule. There's a rule you have to take note of, is the postal rule. That is where when the offeree, the person accepted, is given a time to accept, or the offer is open to a definite date, and the offeree accepts before the expiration of that date, irrespective of receiving it earlier than the date or not, contract is already made. Even if the offerer had not heard earlier before the expiring date, still contract is made, because it is the offerer who has suggested the means, and therefore he knows the consequences of his means, his selection of the means, and therefore the offeree will not worry under this rule, provided he has posted or accepted the offer before the expiration of the date given by the offeror. Whether he receives the response late, it doesn't matter, but the posting and reply must be earlier than the date of expiry. That's all. Then it can be there. We talk about consensus ad idiom already, where the parties agree on contractual terms. So there is the meeting of the mind, consensus ad idiom, meeting of the mind. You must be thinking of the same thing. If not, the court may declare it as void. Your minds are not on the same object. You are thinking of selling, you are thinking, there's no fraud in it, you are thinking of selling your VW car, and your friend is paying for your Benz car. Meanwhile, he's selling the VW, he's not selling the Benz car. But you were thinking it was the Benz car he was selling. So you were paying for Benz car, and he was selling his VW. So that there is no meeting in the mind over the object. So there is no offer and accepting meeting. They have crossed each other. Therefore, it cannot be acceptable under that circumstance. There could also be valuable consideration. So by common law, for a promise or contract to be enforceable, it must either be formalized under seal or supported by consideration. We said that. So consideration represents ideas of reciprocal obligation, something in return for something else, as in Kuri versus Misa or many other cases. And it could be an act or forbearance. You must do something to lock up a promise. When somebody promises you orally, then asks you to perform or do something for that promise, then once you have finished doing what he has asked you to do, the promise is binding. The promise is binding because what he has promised and what he has asked you to do for the promise, and once you have completed doing it, then the promise is binding. He has to deliver. He has to deliver upon the value. So we have different types of consideration, and at times you don't need consideration. We have to go into them one by one. The doctrine of consideration is really open and general. Consideration must not pass. What do we mean by that? A promise which is made after an act has been performed is not enforceable, as in the case of Eastwood versus Kenyon, or Rose Collar versus Thomas. We have different cases which you can use. Consideration must not pass. If somebody has promised and asks you to do something for the promise, you cannot refer to what you had done some time back to substitute what he's asking you to do, because that one has passed. It is performed. It cannot be used now. So he is now giving a promise and said, before the promise can hold, you have to do A, B, C, D. Once you are able to do the A, B, C, D, then we say it's binding. But you cannot refer to the fact that 2 years ago you had already done for him A, B, C, D. It's past. And also we talk about consideration need not be adequate. Consideration need not be adequate. The courts are not concerned with whether adequate value has been given in exchange for a promise. If somebody promises you and asks you to do something as a consideration for the promise, that consideration you are given for the promise does not need to be of the same value of what he has promised you. The court is not interested in it. It could be of lower value or higher value. If you promise somebody, weed my garden for me, and on your birthday I'll give you my car, you can't compare car to weeding of the garden. But it's a consideration. It's valuable. So the court will not say it's too much for what he has asked you to do. No. The value does not need to be adequate to what you have to do under the promise, and therefore we say it's not necessarily adequate. It could be of any value, but of commercial value. Then consideration must be sufficient, not adequate but sufficient. Not necessarily adequate, but must have some value. This means that consideration must be of some economic value, as in the case of White versus Brute, or in the case of Thomas versus Thomas, that is between married people, or Combe versus Combe. Promissory estoppel is a shield and not a sword, and not used as cause of action, and therefore consideration must be considered in that light. So it must be sufficient. It must have some economic value. Then it's okay. Not social. So this is the consideration we had from the common law position. But the Ghanaian law is also made to change some of the positions of the common law. Common law is the law that we inherit from our colonial masters, and we try to change them with our legislations, and our legislations are higher than the common law cases. Therefore, when the Ghanaian law has enacted a law and taken a position, then we move to accept that position to have primacy over the common law. So what we have under the Ghanaian law, under Act 1960, Act 25, and if you take section 81, 82, and then section 10, you see that Ghana has made a few changes to the common law position concerning consideration. And some of them can be read also in other books. Special consideration in construction contracts are also specific. The employer, through the invitation of tender, makes promise to the effect that the successful bidder will be paid for the works that will be executed. So we have different types of it. Genuineness of a contract. Genuineness here means real, exactly what it appears to be, and not artificial. So there must be a genuine intention of the parties to make an agreement. Also, possibility of performance. A valid contract is enforceable if it is acceptable of being performed.